Imagine stepping back in time to the harsh winters of late 18th century America, where frontier woodsmen battled blizzards that could drop temperatures to bone-chilling depths, turning simple log cabins into icy tombs where families huddled around sputtering fires that barely kept the frost at bay. And one wrong move, like running out of firewood or having a poorly built chimney, the difference between survival and a frozen grave. But amid this brutal reality, there was one man, a rugged woodsman named Elias Brennan, living deep in the Wisconsin wilderness around 1795, who dared to challenge everything his neighbors knew about staying warm, building what they called a crazy chimney that looked too small, too shallow, and downright foolish. Yet when the mercury plunged and others shivered in cabins hovering at a miserable 37 degrees Fahrenheit, his humble abode stayed a shocking 31 degrees warmer, defying the deadly cold without burning extra wood or relying on fancy gadgets that didn't even exist back then. You might be wondering how this could possibly be true. Was it some kind of magic, a stroke of luck, or perhaps a forgotten genius hack rooted in real science that turned the tide for pioneers everywhere? And as we dive into this incredible true story inspired by the innovations of Count Rumford, a brilliant inventor who revolutionized fireplaces during that era, ULLC, how one man's bold experiment not only saved his life, but sparked a heating revolution that echoed through history, making us question why we ever settled for inefficient ways to chase away the winter chill. Back in those days, life on the frontier was unforgiving, with settlers chopping wood from dawn till dusk just to feed massive, gaping fireplaces that sucked up heat like a black hole, sending most of the precious warmth straight up the chimney and out into the night sky, leaving rooms smoky, drafty, and barely above freezing, even as logs crackled away. And folks would wake up to find their water buckets solid ice, their breath visible in the air, and sometimes even tragic losses when the cold claimed the weak or unprepared. But Elias, a solitary trapper who'd read about European ideas in tattered pamphlets brought by traders, decided he wasn't going to play by those old rules anymore, sketching out a plan for a chimney that borrowed from Rumford's radical designs, which emphasized efficiency over tradition, and he set to work gathering stones from the riverbed, mixing mortar from local clay, and reshaping his hearth in ways that made his few visitors scratch their heads in disbelief. The traditional fireplaces of the time were deep caverns, built wide and tall to handle big fires. But they wasted energy because the heat radiated upward instead of outward, and the smoke often billowed back into the room due to poor draft, creating a cycle of inefficiency that burned through cords of wood while providing little comfort. Yet Elias envisioned something different, a shallower firebox with sides angled sharply to bounce the heat directly into the living space, a narrowed throat at the top to speed up the smoke's exit and create a stronger updraft, and a massive stone backing to absorb and slowly release warmth like a natural battery. Ideas straight from Rumford's 1796 essays that had already started transforming grand English manners but were unheard of in rough American cabins. As he labored through the fall, stacking stones meticulously and testing small fires to refine the angles, whispers spread among the scattered homesteads about the mad woodsman, wasting his time on a puny chimney that could possibly heat a squirrel's nest, let alone a full cabin. And some even bet he'd abandon it come the first snowfall. But Elias pressed on, driven by a quiet determination born from years of enduring needless hardship, knowing deep down that this hack could change everything if it worked as promised. And as the first flurries dusted the ground, that fateful winter, with dark clouds promising a freeze like no other, everyone wondered, would this crazy invention hold up, or would Elias join the ranks of those who froze in the dark? With the autumn leaves turning crimson and gold across the Wisconsin hills, Elias Brennan rolled up his sleeves and dove headfirst into constructing his revolutionary chimney, drawing directly from the groundbreaking principles laid out by Count Rumford, who had shocked the scientific world in England by proving that bigger was always better when it came to fireplaces. And instead, a smarter design could capture and distribute heat in ways that traditional setups never dreamed of, allowing a modest fire to warm an entire room for hours longer while using far less fuel, which was a godsend for a woodsman like Elias, who spent endless days felling trees and could afford to waste a single log. He started by dismantling his old hearth, a cavernous pit that had served him poorly through previous winters, always belching smoke and letting heat escape like a thief in the night. And in its place, he built a firebox that was strikingly shallow, only about 12 to 18 inches deep compared to the usual 3 feet or more, flanked by sidewalls slanted at precise 135-degree angles to act like mirrors, reflecting the infrared rays from the flames outward into the cabin rather than letting them vanish up the flue. A simple yet ingenious trick that Rumford had tested in aristocratic homes and found boosted efficiency dramatically. turning what was once lost energy into cozy radiance that could raise indoor temperatures by double digits. Above the firebox, Elias narrowed the chimney throat to a slim 4-inch opening, creating a choke that accelerated the hot air's rise and generated a powerful draft, pulling smoke cleanly away without the turbulence that plagued older designs. And he added a smoke shelf, a flat brick ledge to separate the incoming cold air from the outgoing smoke, setting up a natural circulation system where cooler outside air flowed down one side while the heated mixture shot up the other, ensuring the fire burned hotter and cleaner, much like Rumford's experiments in 1795 at the Board of Trade in Whitehall, where he first demonstrated how this setup could eliminate smoky rooms and retain more warmth. To amplify the effect, Elias incorporated thermal mass by using dense sandstone slabs for the backing and surround, stones that absorbed the fire's energy during burning and then radiated it slowly back into the space long after the flames died down, acting as a passive heater that kept the cabin toasty through the night without needing constant tending, a concept Rumford championed in his writings, noting how it mimicked the efficiency of enclosed stoves but in an open fireplace format. And in frontier terms, this meant Elias could sleep soundly instead of waking every hour to stoke the coals. The whole project took him 6 grueling weeks, 3 times longer than slapping together a standard chimney. As he carefully selected stones for their heat-retaining properties, measured angles with a makeshift protractor fashioned from branches, and tested drafts with feathers and smoke to fine-tune the flow, all while neighbors dropped by to gawk and chuckle, calling it a fool's errand and predicting it'd collapse or fill the cabin with soot. But Elias, inspired by stories of Rumford's success in places like Thomas Jefferson's Monticello, where multiple such fireplaces were installed, held firm, explaining patiently how the design would save wood and lives, though few believed him in those skeptical times when change was viewed with suspicion, as he lit the first real fire in his completed hack. Watching the flames dance efficiently and feeling the immediate wave of directed heat, a quiet confidence grew, but the true test loomed on the horizon, for rumors swirled of an incoming Arctic blast, the kind that had claimed homesteads before, and as the skies grew heavy with snow, the question hung in the air like frost. Could this unorthodox chimney really deliver when deathly cold gripped the land, or would the doubters have the last laugh? As the brutal winter of 1795–96 descended upon the Wisconsin frontier like a vengeful force, with winds howling through the pines and temperatures plummeting to sub-zero depths that turned rivers to solid ice and tested the mettle of every soul in the wilderness, Elias Brennan's cabin became the unlikely beacon of warmth in a sea of suffering, thanks to his crazy chimney hack rooted in Count Rumford's timeless innovations, proving once and for all that a shallow, angled fireplace with a streamlined throat could outperform the massive, inefficient hearths that left neighbors freezing and desperate, their cabins barely scraping 37 degrees even as they piled on logs that vanished in puffs of wasted smoke, while Elias lounged comfortably at a steady 68 degrees, sipping hot cider and mending traps without a shiver. A staggering 31-degree difference that saved not just his comfort but potentially his life during one of the coldest snaps on record. When the blizzard hit full force, blanketing the land in feet of snow and isolating homesteads for days, Elias needed only a small armful of wood each evening to ignite his efficient firebox, where the flames licked the angled sides and bounced heat rays directly into the room, warming every corner evenly without the hot and cold spots that plague traditional setups. And as the thermal mass stones soaked up the energy like sponges, they released it gradually through the night, maintaining that cozy glow long after the embers faded. A real-world application of Rumford's principles that had already transformed smoky London drawing rooms into efficient havens. But here on the edge of civilization, it meant survival, cutting firewood consumption by nearly half and freeing Elias from the endless chopping that exhausted others. Neighbors, bundled in layers and burning through their stockpiles at alarming rates, heard tales of his warm cabin through the grapevine and ventured out in the lull between storms, knocking on his door with wide-eyed amazement as they stepped inside to feel the radiant heat envelop them like a blanket, their mockery turning to envy as they saw water staying liquid overnight and bread rising without issue, prompting some to beg for details on how to Rumfordize their own fireplaces, a term that spread like wildfire after Rumford's 1798 publication, influencing builders from England to America and even earning praise from Henry David Thoreau, who hailed it as a modern marvel in his writings. This hack's impact rippled far beyond Elias's humble abode, inspiring a wave of efficient designs that peaked in the early 1800s, with thousands of homes rebuilt to include shallow hearths and angled covings that reflected up to 90% more heat into living spaces, reducing smoke pollution, conserving forests, and making winter bearable for generations of settlers. a testament to how one man's willingness to echoing Rumford's scientific curiosity could shift the course of everyday history, from aristocratic estates to frontier cabins, where it mattered most. In the end, as spring thawed the land and stories of the miracle chimney became legend, Elias proved that innovation wasn't madness, but the key to thriving against nature's odds, leaving us today with lessons on sustainable heating that still apply in our energy-conscious world, reminding us that sometimes the craziest ideas are the ones that change everything. If this tale of frontier ingenuity and historical smarts fired you up, hit that like button, subscribe for more gripping stories from the past that could inspire your own hacks, and drop a comment below sharing what survival trick you'd try in a blizzard. Let us keep the conversation warm.